technically, good morning. And if I talk like I normally talk, it'll be good afternoon before I finish. And I'm going to be moving this in just a minute, the flag here. I want to welcome all of you to, could you do that for me? I want to welcome all of you to another amazing topic at our BLTs. I call it BLTs, Business Leaders Talking, but it's really a Business Leaders Luncheon. I'm Lynn Snodgrass, the CEO of the Best Darn Chamber in Oregon, soon to be the Best Darn Chamber in the Pacific Northwest, because you're going to help me do that. There we go. I want to thank our presenting sponsors, Riverview Community Bank. Larry and Kathy, thank you so much for sponsoring this event consistently. We couldn't do it without your help. And Larry he goes above and beyond. He actually helps organize the speakers as well. So it's a sponsorship in cash, but also he works it. So we appreciate you. And I want to thank our stakeholder sponsors, Portland General Electric, John Maloney. Thank you, John. Appreciate Portland General Electric. Another stakeholder sponsor is Gresham School District, and they're wrapping things up for the year, so they're not here today. And I want to thank our media sponsor, Metro East Community Media. There are flyers as you go out that give you the time for rebroadcasting or broadcasting of this event, replaying. So be sure and pick one of those up. We want to thank you. We've got, Keith is on vacation, and so he had to send 2 people to take his place. I think that we're going to tease him about that next month. We'd also like to recognize any elected officials that are here today. So if you're a school board member or water district, or is there anybody elected that's here today? Having said that, we're moving right on. And our board members. John Maloney, Portland General Electric, is a chamber board member. And Warner Allen, the past president. He's with Warren Allen LLC. He's a recent past president. That being said, oh, look at that. Applause, applause, applause. I'm going to talk slow because the next person I'm going to introduce is coming up here, and he just put a big fork full of food in his mouth. Not pretty. We have an interesting topic today, and I don't know if we want to call it an issue or a novel or what, but there are so many aspects of this particular industry that some we know, we label it what we think we know, but today your horizons are going to be broadened by the variety that we're going to see. As you know, we have done multiple cannabis leaders luncheons or topic lunches because every couple of months something changes a little. The legislature is doing something, or the OLCC is doing something, or there's a new industry that pops up. All that being said, Gresham Area Chamber wants to stay on top of the entire issue as it impacts our entire state. That being said, I would like to bring to the podium the past president and past chairman of the Government Affairs Council, Warren Allen. Warner, come on up. Don't trip over this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lynn. She really didn't have to talk that long for me to swallow my food. I'm a former Marine, so we go through food very quickly. So Senate Bill 301 sits in a committee in Salem right now, and the intent of that bill is to mandate that businesses accommodate medical marijuana users. In effect, what this would do is restrict all businesses from having a zero-tolerance drug policy in their workplace. Now, while Oregonians recently passed a recreational use of marijuana law, it was advertised and promoted that that law would not involve the workplace. Yet, here we are. There are around 3,000 bills filed every session. 2,000 of them don't see the light of day. But Senate Bill 301 got a hearing and a work session, then passed out of the Judiciary Committee and is now in the Business and Transportation Committee. This bill has legs. Action was taken. If not this year, then next. The die is cast. What we face is an uphill battle to keep our employees and customers safe. Without the tools to provide that protection and safety, our liability risk increases as well. None of the people speaking today wrote Senate Bill 301, but each will provide their perspective on where we are and what is ahead. What don't we understand? What should we plan for? As it pertains to cannabis, what is the future for Oregonians on the road, in their workplace, or at their homes? With us today are three experts in their respective fields. From the Oregon Liquor Control Commission, who's responsible for the oversight of cannabis, we have Amanda Borup. From Empower Oil, and not the fossil fuel kind, we have Trista Okel. And from the Gresham Police Department, we will hear from Captain Claudio Grandjean. Each will have 7 to 10 minutes to speak, and we will open it up with questions after that time. So please welcome Amanda Borup to the podium. Thank you, Amanda.
Hi, thank you for having me. My name is Amanda Borup. I'm a policy analyst with the Oregon Liquor Control Commission. The Oregon Liquor Control Commission has the regulatory authority over the recreational marijuana program. So we license producers, who are the growers, processors, who then take the product and make it into another substance, wholesalers, which look like your typical wholesale distribution, and then retailers. And the retailers will have the direct customer sales. Along with that, we also license what are called worker permits. So everybody that works within the marijuana system has to have a worker permit, which I like to think of as a mix between a food handler's card and a server's permit. It's a little bit of both. They take a short class on the OLCC website, and then they take a test, have a background check done, and then after that, they're able to get their worker's permit. We also have a certificate called a research certificate, but unfortunately we haven't had many applications for that yet, and none that are very serious applicants, but we do hope to see that in the future. So what I was thinking you probably would want to hear most today is kind of a little bit more about what's happening with licensing statewide, and then also in the city of Gresham as far as what licenses look like. So the city of Gresham itself, we have 7 licensees within the city limits. 4 of those are retailers, 2 wholesalers, and 1 producer. And then you'll notice if you ever do check our website, we don't give the actual physical addresses for producers, processors, or wholesalers, because those addresses, based on 2016 legislation, were exempt from the public record for the time being. The reason for that is a lot of the farmers throughout the state of Oregon, we have many demographics throughout the state, and a lot of very rural areas, and people were concerned if everybody knew their address in a very rural area, they might have more visitors than they would like. Statewide, though, we have a lot more licensees. We have about 1,200, a little bit over 1,200 licensees statewide. 600 of those are producers, so the growers. 103 processors. And I should say processors can be in different categories. They can make extracts, which would be the closed loop extraction systems where you're using the solvent to extract the product. And those have to have the fire code approval and make sure they're up to building and structural code. You have edible producers who would be making like a food item, and those work with the Oregon Department of Agriculture with food safety and their kitchen certifications. Concentrate processors, and that would be something like your can of butter that you would see. And then we have topicals, and you'll hear more about the topicals in a moment. We have 72 wholesale licensees, 457 retailers, and then 20 labs. And so I'm not sure if anybody caught the story over the weekend about the lab testing and the pesticides. They are having some issues in the supply chain right now because prior to marijuana being legalized, there was not a lot of pesticide testing on the medical product. When recreational marijuana passed, the legislature gave the Oregon Health Authority, who regulates the medical program, the authority to write the rules around testing for both recreational and medical. And so now all of the products that go through the supply chain are tested for about 70 pesticides, tested for quite a few solvents, if solvents are used in the process, and then also tested for water content and potency. They also have labeling rules that go right along with the testing rules so that information is available on the label. What we have through the recreational program, another would be difference than the prior medical program, is we have what's called the cannabis tracking system. And what this is they call it a seed to sale tracking system, where as soon as a producer has a plant Actually, if they have small plants or clones, they have them in batches, and then as they grow up, they get their own tag. And so that number stays with that product throughout its life cycle. So when it gets transferred to another licensee, that number is transferred and accepted, and we know that that product has then moved through the supply chain. It's very nice for a regulatory point of view because we get to see what kind of transfers are happening, where a product is, what product started at, how it ends up. It gives us a lot of data that we didn't have before, and that data will get better as time progresses. Recently, speaking of legislation, there was a bill that passed, and it makes it so that anybody who's in the medical program who grows more than 12 plants, so that would be somebody who's growing for more than 2 patients, would have to be tracked within the OLCC tracking system. So they can decide to stay medical. They don't have to become a recreational licensee, but if they have over those 12 plants, they do need to go through all of the tracking. So that will be an eye on the medical product itself and see how it's moving through the supply chain as well. So we were talking a little bit earlier at the table, and I think one of the big surprises with the recreational marijuana, most of us can agree with, is the interest in the industry and how large the industry is. Original estimates were based off of Washington and Colorado, per capita estimates, turning them into Oregon, and we really, really underestimated the size of the Oregon market. Initially, we thought we would have around 1,000 licensees or 1,000 applications in at this point right now. So right now we have about the 1,200 licensees, but we have almost 3,000 applications in. And then the taxes. So the taxes started with the recreational product. And since that, it was started an early start, which was in July of 2000, or June, was it June 16? Since then, we've collected about $80 million in tax revenue. And then $2 million of that's for the local 3%, which just started in October. And then Department of Revenue, like all other sources of revenue in the state, they're in charge for the taxes, and they're working on starting to get those distribution, that information out to the public and start kind of making that happen. So I would guess probably in the next couple of months, we'll have some information on how the taxes really look. So that being said, I guess a couple things that are on the horizon. We have, like I said, the bill that just passed that brings the 12 plants into the track system. We have another bill, Senate Bill 56, which also brings more of the medical in. It may let them have less security requirements than a regular licensee, since they wouldn't be a regular licensee, but it adjusts that a little bit. And then we have 1015, Senate bill, or it might be House bill, actually. It involves industrial hemp. Industrial hemp has proven also to be a pretty big industry in Oregon, and what this bill would allow is an industrial hemp grower who's registered with the Oregon Department of Agriculture to be able to take that product after harvested and bring it to an OLCC processor for processing. Right now, there is no regulated processors of hemp, and the way the law is written right now, the OLCC can't allow that to be processed within one of our licensed premises. But with this change in law, that would allow the hemp growers to have a safe method of processing the product to move on to consumer sale. So I brought a couple handouts. I wanted to keep it short because I'm sure you have lots of questions and we're going to get a lot of information. I brought a handout that's called State Resources by Topic, and they're all out on the front table. And this basically just kind of outlines, if you have a question, which agency would you contact? I mean, OLCC is always more than happy to direct phone calls, but a lot of times it's nice to know just where to look. And so this talks about taxation in the corner. So for example, things about taxes, whether you're wanting to file or whether you're wanting to get information for your city or county, and then it would lead you to the Department of Revenue. I also brought the Educate Before You Recreate. So this was designed after Ballot Measure 91 was passed. We realized as an agency that nobody had any oversight over public awareness of what the law was and what you were allowed to do and not do. So our director asked the legislature for about $300,000 just to do a public awareness campaign. So you'll notice it doesn't have the OLCC logo on it. And so it's not something that brings people back to us. It basically just allows people to know what is the law and what's not the law. So it points out, you can't bring it out of the state of Oregon. That would still be illegal. You can't drive. That's still illegal. You'd be driving under the influence. So it's kind of a handy way for people to be able to say, okay, this is what I'm allowed to do. This is what I'm not allowed to do. Because the law does change quite a bit. And then the third handout is just talking about the Go Legal. So this one was more OLCC related, and it basically just talks about the different license types and then shows what the regulated market looks like. And so with that, I'll go ahead and have the next person up, and then we'll take questions at the end.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. My name is Trista Okel, and my company is Empower Body Care. I make topical, cannabis-infused topical products. They are non-psychoactive, and they are used to reduce pain, inflammation, and skin trauma. So anything from psoriasis to eczema to cold sores, bruising, our products will help with all of those types of conditions. I first got into the industry before it was an industry. I started making products for my mom, who deals with 3 forms of arthritis, as well as a broken back in a couple of spots with some failed surgeries. And I wanted to help keep my mom off of opiates for as long as possible, or at least lower the opiate use that she had to take in order to live a as normal as possible lifestyle. Now, when I first started working on these products, my mom worked at the Office of Drug Abuse and Alcohol Prevention Programs. And there was no way she could go to work smelling like cannabis oil. So I have a wine steward and aromatherapy background, and I ended up combining a number of different essential oils that all had the same therapeutic benefits. In other words, they also help to mitigate pain, inflammation, and skin issues, and combine them together to not only cover the smell, but also work towards helping with these different conditions. So, and that was a long process. I worked on those in my kitchen for 8 years to try and get the most effective medicine for my mom. That said, fast forward a few years, and here I am with a company that is the #1 selling topical company in the state of Oregon. We have 2 lines, which I like talking about the hemp versus cannabis. Our 2 lines are a cannabis-derived CBD and THCA, which is the acid form of THC in the plant, so it's tetrahydrocannabinolic acid. That is a non-psychoactive form. If you were to eat it, you would not get high. That said, we combine that with the CBD, which is also known for its anti-inflammatory properties, and that is in one line, our black label line of products that are sold in the OLCC licensed dispensaries. Are they called dispensaries anymore? It's retail shops, right? Retail stores. So those products are sold in those stores. Now, lots of people are afraid of the idea of THC or THCA. They don't necessarily believe us when we tell them that it won't enter their bloodstream or that they won't get high from it. So I created a hemp-derived CBD formulation as well. It's exactly the same, exact same product, just with different input. So hemp CBD, white label over here, THCA CBD, black label over here. I cannot produce them in the same facility. So we rented a space in the same building that we're in with a different suite number, and that is where we create the white label products, which also are sold in dispensaries. Or, I'm sorry, it was dispensaries for a long time. That's also where they're sold in the retail rec stores. That said, when I was asked to speak today, I wasn't exactly sure which way I was going to go, if I was going to talk about the medicinal benefits of topicals, or how topicals are kind of known as the ambassador products in the cannabis world, in that people who would never use cannabis in any other way, shape, or form, and are usually pretty anti, will try a topical product when they need relief and they're not getting any relief from, say, opiates that The more opiates you use, the less effective they are, right? Also with the opiate epidemic in this country, we need to do our part to do whatever we can to lessen that, and topical products really help with that quite a bit. But I kind of wanted to bring up banking. That seems to be kind of a really important issue, actually, for most cannabis businesses. The reason being is that, for instance, right now I have $3,500 cash in my purse. I trust you all. I knew that was going to happen, so I felt safer doing that and announcing it. Thank you. That said, I really hate to have my salespeople driving around town with, $3,000 in their bag before they make a drop. It's dangerous, and to me, it's the biggest public safety issue we have as far as the cannabis industry goes. Right now, even though they found some extracts, did anybody else see the Oregonian article about the extracts that were contaminated with pesticides? So Noel Crombie wrote a piece on 3 companies that had contaminated extracts, and they did 2 rounds of testing on them with 2 different labs. And what ended up happening was they all tested positive for banned pesticides in them the first run, and then the second time they reran the samples, they came out clean except for 1. So 2 out of the 3 came out clean the second time. And these were all products that were tested before they went into the system. So here we are. Is it the labs? I know that for me it's difficult to get when we've spent $15,000 so far this year testing our topical products. Our strongest topical product is 2.5% THCA. Everything else is below 1%, right? So we have spent over $15,000 getting our products tested for just potency alone. And we are 3rd in the line of the testing procedures, right? Am I making sense, or am I, okay, because sometimes I can talk industry shorthand and be a little bit over people's heads. That said, the testing is still not what it should be. We are really looking forward to the labs kind of getting all on the same page. Right now, as far as the ORLAP, which is the testing regulations that the labs have to follow, those rules are mostly geared towards protocols for testing the plant matter, the flower, and not extra products like I make soaking salts. Well, salt and cannabinoids have opposing polarities, so they don't stick together very well. We have to make them stick together. Things like that, issues where edible products have a number of different ingredients in them, so it's more difficult to do the testing. That seems to be an issue. Also, it's possible that some of the labs don't clean their equipment quite well enough. And I know that because of our CBD products being tested that have 0 THC in them. And a couple of the labs have come back with, minute traces of THC in them, even though the concentrate that we had tested, remember, 2 separate facilities, no cross-contamination. So even though those products and the extracts that went in the product were tested and came up with 0 THC in them, my finished product has shown up, of the CBD product, has shown up with THC in it. Took it to a different lab. The other lab did not find any THC. That tells me that maybe the lab equipment wasn't as clean as it should be. I can't think of any other reason. Anyway, excuse my lamenting over such issues. It's still, this industry is still growing, it's still learning, and we are still working out the kinks, for sure. The testing, we literally have the strictest testing in the United States for requirements in the United States for cannabis. It is cleaner than the food we're eating. And still, there are pesticides found in it sometimes. I can't wait for that to stop happening. That seems to be, that and banking, those 2 things together seem to be the biggest public safety risk for me, in what I can tell, I have to say. So those were kind of the issues that I was hoping to discuss today. I'm open to any questions that anyone would like to put forth. I'm curious to hear what you have to say today, because I think that those issues are also really important. But thank you.
I took notes on my phone here, so I'm opening up my phone. Hi, everybody. My name is Claudio Grandjean. I'm a captain with the Gresham Police Department. I'm in charge of the patrol unit. And I'm going to introduce Jonathan Beal, who's a detective with our special enforcement team. And I'm just introducing him by way of, when we get to the Q&A, if there's some questions that I don't know, because he's on the front lines of investigating narcotics. And so that's what I brought him for. You know, when I started police work, it was illegal to smoke marijuana. That was really simple. These previous two speakers are much more experts in the state we're in now, because when marijuana was decriminalized, that essentially removes our involvement. And so we become less and less involved in any kind of marijuana enforcement. And many of these regulations and rules, we're not even, in the same way alcohol and tobacco is regulated, we don't get into the weeds, pun intended, on those kind of regulations. OLCC does. And so we really, our involvement has been less and less with marijuana enforcement. It's complaint driven now, but even then we have to triage those complaints. If someone just calls and says, hey, I have a neighbor who's smoking pot, well, we have to explain to them that's not illegal, and we wouldn't get involved in something like that. The only things we get involved with in marijuana enforcement now, I wouldn't say the only things, but the major things would be other livability issues that maybe an illegal grow might bring. And so we had a situation like that recently in Northwest Gresham, where it was an illegal grow in a neighborhood, and there was other livability issues that brought it to light. And so we ended up, using the marijuana enforcement part to clean that up. But for the most part, we don't do any kind of marijuana enforcement, which again, that's what the voters have asked of us to be less involved in this. A couple of the concerns regarding the legalization of marijuana that just they're on our radar would be the butane hash oil, the BHO, which is different than the oil that she's talking about. This is a renegade process where just a couple people in their garage are extracting a real rich in the THC. It ends up being like a piece of bark, and the process is real volatile. And we had a couple years ago an explosion in a garage that knocked the garage door completely off, killed one person instantly and killed another person later in the hospital. And so that's a concern for us when people are just doing this wherever they find us, like a motorhome or something. They could potentially injure other people. The reason that process is popular to do is because what it produces is a real rich piece of like bark. And they call them dabs that they can do, that they can use to get, it produces a really good high. And so those are valuable. And they're also able to use parts of the plant that normally would have been discarded. And so it becomes really more efficient use of your plants. So that's something that's on our radar. We're not seeing a lot of it. We do see a little bit of that. The other thing that's also an interesting, and it may even relate to your comments about the banking, is there are financiers from other parts of the country that are financing marijuana grows here. Which makes sense if you think about it. There's only 3 states to choose from where you can do it legally, and we're one of them. And so if I want to somehow distribute marijuana illegally in my state, I'm going to reduce my criminal liability in terms of the growing and the cultivating and the packaging if I can do it somewhere where it's legal. And so a lot of these grows aren't just being the demand isn't just coming from Oregon. It's coming from other parts of the country, because right now it's illegal in other parts of the country. Just anecdotally, I somebody who I know, who Lynn knows also, had a neighbor who had 30 acres that and this is pretty common out in the country out here. They had 30 acres that they just it was leased to nursery stock, and this guy ended up partitioning those into 1-acre lots and individually leasing them for marijuana grows. And he he's making 4 times as much money. Literally, he was making around $300,000 a year. He's making $300,000 a month now by doing that individually. So there's a lot of money to be made doing that. So some people that's why is pushing a lot of the growth out here. A couple of just interesting things that I think are worth pointing out that are local laws that they're city ordinances that our city leaders had the good foresight to push. One is zoning around marijuana grows. You can't have a commercial grow in a neighborhood. And so those are a livability issue. And it makes sense, so you're not having a commercial thing going on in a neighborhood. So that's within our city charter, it's not a state law. And then also around medicinal marijuana and having, at least in Gresham, if I'm growing medicinal marijuana for medicinal purposes, I have to have the person that is receiving that benefit living under that roof. So we don't have distributors of several medicinal places living within Gresham, and the people who benefit from that are living elsewhere. There's a couple of things that are just interesting for just Gresham only. The other issue that we see come up, or that we're often asked about, is DUIs that are marijuana DUIs. I had our analysts pull some numbers, and there was a spike in 2016, the first year it was legal, but it's actually it's down a little bit this year. And I don't know if we have enough data to say if we have an upward trend or not. We have the spike, and then we have a little bit of a downward trend this year. So whether it's upward or not, I don't know. One thing I can say is it's a different skill to detect a driver who's under the influence of marijuana that most of our patrol officers really aren't adept at. Most of us can pick out a drunk driver, and they have training on picking out and processing a drunk driver. And part of the processing is gathering the evidence to be able to testify in court. We need to have a drug recognition expert in order to, if someone is only high from marijuana and that's causing some kind of impairment when they're driving. And we only have 3 drug recognition experts. Unlike, as you're probably all aware, with alcohol, there's the legal limit of 0.08 that's understood and basically medically tested that's a level at which someone's going to feel some kind of impairment to which the laws recognize, okay, you can't drive anymore, or that impairment's going to cause a problem when you drive. There is no legal standard for impairment with marijuana, so it's not we can pull the THC in your blood and say, oh, you have this much THC, therefore you're impaired. And that's still getting worked out. But the drug recognition experts are the ones who are able to look at certain physical signs, and along with the driving that an officer would observe, put together a case for that kind of DUII. So it's really difficult to prove right now, and I imagine some of those are probably slipping through the cracks. But that is certainly a concern as more and more people potentially are smoking marijuana. That's really all I have as far as our major concerns. Like I said, I think the reason our involvement is less and less, and a lot of these laws that you see, we don't even get into those because it's what the people have voted for. It's what they want from us, and so you're not going to see us enforcing a lot of the laws that we used to enforce. It used to be very simple before. Basically the formula was, is it marijuana? Yes. Okay, it's illegal. That was really all we had to do. Now there's all these issues around who can grow how much and whatnot. We just don't get into those. So, thank you.
Okay, it's going to be time for questions now, and what I'd like to do is be able to take a question and then pass the mic so that they don't have to keep going back and forth to the podium. But to Claudio's, is it sergeant, lieutenant, major, what are you now? Captain, he just got promoted recently. Captain Grandjean was talking about is the testing. We have the ability with alcohol to know what that test is. There is no test for impairment. You can't test somebody immediately, which is one of the reasons that Senate Bill 301 is so scary, is because Senate Bill 301, which Warner started to talk about, says that you need to accommodate medical marijuana in your workplace, but you have no test to see if taking that medical marijuana actually impairs your employee. So not only does it remove the zero tolerance policies that a lot of companies have. But there's actually no way, even if you wanted to accommodate them, to test to see if they've had too much, if they're impaired, if they can't do your books, if they can't drive a forklift, all of those kinds of things. So as Trista says, and I think Amanda said the same thing, it's at the beginning stages. This is a new adventure. I don't know if you want to call it an adventure, but that's clearly where we are. There are so many things that we don't know, and oftentimes when we don't know something, we rush ahead to try to fix it rather than fixing it before we rush ahead. So anyway, having said that, time for questions. Yes, did you have something, Tristan?
Yeah, I wanted to add
Because it's recorded,
Yes.
that's why we do this.
Okay, great. Yeah, I wanted to add a couple of thoughts on both Senate Bill 301 and impairment testing. And that is having people be able to use cannabis on their own time, not an hour before they go to work, but say in the evening when they get home, as some of us might have a glass of wine, I think is a civil liberty. And right now, the only testing we have for that, besides blood tests, are urinalysis testing, which test the dead metabolites. So if someone were to, I'm not an advocate for smoking in any way, shape, or form. So, but I'll bring it up anyway. Because so if someone had an edible on the weekend, say someone is a medical marijuana patient and they did some yard work and their back is killing them, and they don't know that they can use topicals to take care of that. If they take an edible on the weekend and you want to give them a urinalysis test on Tuesday to make sure that they're not impaired at work because they're a known medical marijuana patient within your company, the dead metabolites from last weekend are going to show. The dead metabolites from 30 days ago, well, from 26 days ago are going to show. So even though they're not high on the spot, they would still test positive, which is part of the problem with DUI testing, with DUI. Pretty much only impairment testing is going to be fair.
Mm-hmm. Accurate.
Yeah, exactly.
We would agree.
Right?
we would agree.
So I do think there are some organizations that are working on impairment testing criteria. Have you guys heard of this as well?
I haven't, but that would be something that the drug regulation experts would
I'm super geeky, so I'm a drug policy wonk, I guess would be the best. So they are working on impairment testing for employers and also obviously for law enforcement, because I'm part of the industry. I don't want to see people, behind the wheel high. Yeah.
I have a couple of patients. Excuse me. I have a couple of patients. They have a lot of pain and they're trying to avoid too many opioids and such. I did have one patient. He was considering using. I don't know if it was the topical CBD. I think he was interested in it, but he was worried about his work. Now you say people that don't know about the creams. Would a patient be able to use the creams and be okay on the drug testing?
Absolutely.
Repeat.
Yes, absolutely. And the reason is it doesn't break the blood-brain barrier. Also, for the most effective, CBD will never show up in a drug test because they don't test for CBD. Also, CBD is non-psychoactive completely. It has no psychoactive properties whatsoever. You cannot get high from CBD. So that is always a safe bet. However, if you do want to include a topical, so I was talking about the white label and black label. My white label, which is CBD, hemp-derived CBD only, I would look at that as more of a regular strength, and the black label with the THCA and CBD as an extra strength. So start, just like with using edibles, start low and go slow, And if the white label works fine for your pain and manages pain that way, then, use a CBD only topical. And then move forward after that. But it's still, although someone could use cannabis in some other way and sue me for not passing a drug test, I can't make the claim that it won't. But I will tell you this, we had a group of ladies from Ontario, Oregon, from the Lutheran Church, who all deal with rheumatoid and osteoarthritis issues. And I got them to get their cards. This is back in 2008. They all got their medical marijuana cards, and I gave them, like from here to here, quart jars of my oil, which, smells very minty, a little bit of lavender. It's nice, right? And I asked them to use it at least 3 times per day for 3 months. And then I drug tested everybody in the end with urinalysis test. And we not only on the stick, but also we sent it in. So everybody passed. Not one, no false positives, nothing. Everybody passed. And one of the ladies went into remission with her rheumatoid arthritis. And since then, she used to be on Humira. She's off the Humira. She stopped taking that 6 weeks into our study. And she's only had 2 flare-ups since. So I think there's a lot of medicinal benefits. I cannot wait to have the money to research better. But yeah, I would start and answer your question. Sorry, I totally tangented, but I hope that helps.
Must be a horrible marketing problem that you have to tell people this isn't what you think. This isn't what you think over and over and over again. We have that. Another question? John.
Have you seen a reduction in hardcore illegal drugs and drunk driving with the legalization of marijuana?
No. No. In fact, I'll let Jonathan speak about the hardcore drugs because that's exactly where he works. But there is no shortage of work for him and his crew. So.
Yeah, my name's John Beal. So there's not a shortage of drugs. I mean, we can take large amounts of hard drugs off the street, and then somebody else is going to pop up, and take their place. Unfortunately, it's kind of how the system works. Not to say that what we do doesn't work because we are taking them off for a period of time, and it does slow it down for a period of time, and then potentially saves a lot of lives. But as far as the marijuana goes and the relation to that. It's hard to tell with stat-wise how we're doing with, marijuana DUIs and things like that. Because sometimes those stats aren't reported because we don't catch everybody. We don't have a wide net that catches every single person that's, driving under the influence of marijuana. Crime, just like crime, sometimes crime isn't reported and we can't have a stat for that. So whether it's up or down, not exactly sure with the legalization of it. But I can say for absolute certainty that, crossing that line, after marijuana and legalizing other drugs besides that is probably going to be problematic. I have my personal opinions about stuff, and I think I have my professional opinion as well. But I can tell definitely that. It's a sticky situation when we get into making specified laws and saying you can have X amount of this, X amount of that, and then you can't do this and you can't do this. It's just, other than the general laws, like the captain was saying, back in the day, having marijuana, it was illegal and you can't have it. So that makes it very black and white. It's easy for us to deal with. When you get into the really dissected versions of the laws, just for example, recently we have a new Senate bill. It's not 301, but it's been passed. It's going to be a law. It's changing a lot of the marijuana laws for the enforcement side of it. We didn't even know about it. And this is 2 months old. So it's it's ever changing. Things are changing, and then it's taking a lot of laws off the books, and it's creating new laws. And so just last week we served a search warrant, and like we said, we don't do a lot of marijuana enforcement unless it's criminal or unless it's a community complaint. So we had a long-standing community complaint with somebody who was dealing what they thought was actually harder drugs, white powders and things like that. It turned out to be marijuana. And we wound up having to deal with it because there's just so much, and we get a lot of animosity too from the community saying, well, why aren't you doing anything about this? Well, I mean, look around. This is exactly what our community wants us to do. So we're taking a step back, and then when the community complains about it, then we'll say, okay, we'll take a closer look. If there's something we can do about it, we will. So we did, and then we served a search warrant on the guy's house. We recovered a lot of marijuana, some honey oil, and things like that, and guns, and he could legally possess the guns because he wasn't a felon and all that stuff because he's just doing marijuana. But at the same time, we lodged him for a felony crime that was, an Oregon revised statute. at least as far as we knew. And then we get an email from our district attorney saying, hey, that's not a law anymore. As of 2 months ago, you can't book them on that, but we can book them on this other thing. So it's just, things change. It's a lot of things change, and we have to kind of keep up with, the trends of how the laws are going and what the Senate is doing, what the House is doing. And then we don't get updates all the time. We don't have senators that live in the building with us so that are telling us, hey, this is what's happening. You got to watch out for this crime that's coming out here and watch out for that crime. It's a lot. So, outside of like, community complaints and problems with that, like that's the majority of what we're focusing on. We still do drug tips. We still investigate them as far as we can go. If there's nothing to investigate, then we'll call them and say there's nothing to investigate. But yeah, the bulk of what I do, the bulk of what my team does is, heroin, meth, cocaine. We do pills and prescription drugs. But those are the drugs, those are the ones that are really kind of plaguing us. Those are the ones that we're seeing with the guys out there that are, stealing a lot of things from everyone and making problems for the community. I would say few and far between the marijuana clients or patients are the ones that are not really causing that problem. Now, it may be a side thing where they may be using heroin and they may have marijuana, but, to be honest with you, my professional opinion is not saying that the marijuana is driving that specific function of them to be able to say, I need to go steal this, or I need to go take that. I need to go cause this problem over here and X, Y, and Z. So.
Thank you, Jonathan. I think that several of you mentioned the banking issue, the cash issue. One of the bills that was passed this year, I think it was a bill, it might have been a regulation that was changed, is that those that do grow have to pay the income tax. They have to pay the payroll taxes. Well, they can't write a check and send it. That's illegal. So they had to drive to Salem with that money and take it into the Department of Revenue and deposit it that way monthly. So what would it take for, a bad guy's a bad guy, no matter what he's doing, to follow some of these guys who you'd know that on a regular basis they're going down I-5, stopping at the Department of Revenue, and there's only so many police officers in Salem, so somebody eventually is going to get hit, if you will, not hit that kind, but their cash. So they changed the ordinance from monthly to quarterly, so that now it's a bigger pot of money, but it's not quite as consistent, and you can't track them quite as well, because you could go any time within that quarter and pay your taxes. So at least they're attempting to try to make it safer, if you will, but naturally, the banking portion of it, and some of the friends that we have, the revenues that they're getting from that is under their mattress someplace. It's still cash, because they can't bank it safely or legally. So another question, Amanda? Oh, not a question. You're going to clarify something I just blabbered about, huh?
No.
Okay.
Nope, you're exactly right. But what I wanted to point out was there was a piece of legislation in early 2016 that allows the OLCC to share the information we get about sales from the cannabis tracking system with banks. So there is a credit union in Oregon that banks marijuana clients, and so we're able to sell or to ship them basically the data for those clients, showing what their sales were and what their transfers were. So then they can look at that as far as the deposits, and it makes their job as compliance easier for the banks. And so it's still in the very beginning phases, but it is, I think, hope for the industry that there are banks that are going to be willing to do that with the new mechanisms that are there.
Thank you. Question, Dorothy?
Well, I'm going to take this from the retailer side. Well, okay, I answered this question, the last one. I was down in Southern Oregon, and there's a great deal of marijuana down there, marijuana grows, processors, whatever. And it's turned into being a cash economy as opposed to a credit card or check. And so this looks to me like they're putting the onus on the retailer as the person that launders the money through the bank. But I mean, and I'm not saying they're illegal, but yet they're the ones that are having to deal with the cash that the growers or whatever are are giving them to buy their product. And are they tracing that? I misunderstood, I think, the lady that gave the talk. Ruth Miles. She gave the example of a business in Southern Oregon that was installing safety alarms and things on properties. And he started out a small dealer, but he increased his income by about 300 or 400%, and the state went and asked what happened. And he was, I guess, selling alarm equipment to retailers. That's where I'm coming from.
And the other part of that story is that as he continued to bank, more and more of his revenue was coming from that industry, and the bank closed him down. They stopped doing business with him as a business, which was a legal business, and personally as well, because they're under federal regulations and they have to be careful. So it is an unfortunate, but it's one of those dominoes that we have. Another question? Okay. Not a question, some more information. I love this. You're a good guy.
Thanks. So,
Not that the others are bad.
Right. So I wanted to actually answer your question, sir, just a little bit more. In Colorado, the number of teens using cannabis lowered significantly with legalization of cannabis. And also DUIs tend to go down statistically in legal states.
How do you know that? How do they know that if it's not illegal anymore? How would they track legal use compared? I mean, you see what I'm saying?
I think what it has to do with is, high school students that are polled. Do you use or have you ever used cannabis?
Oh, okay. So you're trusting a teenager?
No.
To tell the truth.
I am not trusting a teenager to tell the truth.
Home on time.
What I'm saying is they are noticing less.
Okay.
And they're admitting to it less. I don't know why they would admit to it less in a legal environment.
Okay.
Or in a regulated environment. It's not really legal. It's taxed and regulated.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, question. You're so official today.
This goes back to the banking question. Hopefully I don't mess this up too bad, but at one point in time I understood that Colorado did initiate a bank to accommodate the marijuana growers. Has that been looked into in Oregon at all about that? I mean, if there's a way around that, because I know that, I believe that's still occurring in Colorado, that they can bank their money because they set up, as part of their marijuana policy, they set up a financial institution that would take care of that money. Has that been looked into in Oregon at all?
Okay, I'm going to do Kathy first because you raised your hand like you knew something.
I previously worked at M-Bank in Gresham, and I work at Riverview Bank, and M-Bank did bank cannabis-related businesses, and we worked directly with the FDIC to set up our program and to follow their regulations, and really it just ended up being too onerous for the size of bank that we were, the tracking, et cetera. So banks can do it. It's quite a job to get it set up. Well, it's still federally illegal. So, I'm a commercial lender, and on the lending side, I would have lots of people call me and want loans because we were taking deposits. So, maybe, but, the regulators will say, we consider these different businesses high-risk business. Why are you in working with high-risk businesses? So, it's a tough thing.
Yeah, and the paperwork alone, keeping track, it's like every deposit, where did the money come from, how much? I mean, it is, especially if you're the only one that's doing it, it's a massive amount of paperwork, as I understand it. Did you have something you wanted to say while I'm here? And I'll be right.
I was going to say, just through the OLCC, initially when we were charged with the regulation of the program, there were a lot of talks about how we could, help with the money issue and the cash issue. That being said, especially with California legalizing marijuana, there is a larger congressional delegation now, and our congressmen and women from Oregon have been very, very strong about the banking issues. And so at this point in time, as far as the state agency is concerned, we wouldn't be looking to fill that gap, but working with our congressional delegation, our state and local representatives to make sure that we can help any way needed.
So I've applied for an account at Maps Credit Union in Salem. Their closest branch is Woodburn. And they charge processors, which, because we mix extract into, lotion, we are a processor. They charge us when they approve us for the account, which will be sometime in the next 60 days. They charge us $500 a month for the privilege of banking. Now, yeah, it's painful. $250 I can see. $500 feels a little much, but at least I'm going to have safe banking. That said, it's so regulated though that there is no owner draw from an account that goes through that, because the oversight is and the weekly or monthly audits are so intense. You better not ever buy something personal out of the bank account, which is not right to do anyway. However, sometimes when you're a new business or whatever and you're very hand to mouth, that seems like kind of what someone would want to do. I don't know. Did that make sense?
Yeah, you have to be very careful, more careful than just regular careful. Another question? Shelley, did you have a question? Nope. Okay. Does the media have a question? No. How about you, Jonathan? Okay. I found it interesting when, Captain, I'll be right there. When Captain Grandjean was talking about tracking information, I remember having a conversation with Gussie McRobert one time. Actually, I was having a listening time with Gussie at that point in time at the Capitol, because I was complaining that there was crime on light rail. And she was not happy with me for bringing that up. She said, there is no crime on light rail. Well, at the time, there was no way to track that because there was no box to check that said light rail. It didn't say max. It was, at the max line, but it was on 162nd, so it was something different. Once they put that in, I got to prove to her that I was right, but it was too late. But the point is that with some of the things that you guys are doing, if you're not tracking the marijuana, if you're tracking something else, then naturally the numbers wouldn't necessarily be increasing because they're doing other things instead of checking the box that says marijuana, which doesn't mean they're not doing it or it's not illegal or whatever. It's just a matter of how you track the numbers, right?
The other just minor point related to that is the numbers aren't real high. And so a couple of numbers skews it. The example I've used in the past is homicides. We have some years where we have 0 homicides. In fact, we had a year where we had 0 homicides, the next year we had 6. It's a 600% increase in homicides in a year, but it's a normal fluctuation that we've seen throughout. That's part of the reason why I say I don't know that we have enough data until we see is there a trend that goes one way or the other.
Obviously, that wasn't a criticism. It's just still, again, a beginning industry. How do we track it right? Sir?
Thank you. Well, last time, at our last luncheon, I asked the last question, and unfortunately, I shut everything down, so I'm not going to ask that question again. But in your opinions, okay, so we've had this law in the books for a year plus now, and it's 2017. 2027's now coming up. Where do you see the industry? Where do you see regulations in about 2 sentences?
He was looking right at you, dear. And we can go over there.
I actually get this question on a regular basis, I think, and what I always say and what I really do hope, and I think the agency would agree with me, is that we would have a successful regulated industry and that Oregonians are receiving tax revenue, which is one of the main reasons I believe it got voted in. And so people are doing what they're supposed to be doing, have access to banks, are able to actually work and contribute as a regular business would in society.
Great. Trista?
I hope for that. I would love to be treated. I would love for my company to be treated as a regular business and to not be a continual second-class citizen for trying to give people pain relief without affecting their organs. But in 10 years, I do see definitely. So I was right about my first prediction in 2004, which was 2014 for Oregon legalization. And I believe that we are probably going to be nationwide legal in 10 years.
Really? Mm-hmm. Wow. Did you have something you wanted to say about 10 years from now? Besides, you'll be retired. I knew you were going to say that.
I do believe we'll probably be nationwide legal, I think, just because like some of those issues I was talking about are brought on by the fact that there's places where it's legal and where it isn't. I don't see what the solution is, and I just think overall there's a changing attitude towards marijuana use, and so I think that's what we'll probably see. I wouldn't be surprised.
I was going to say, as long as I think that, in 10 years or whatever, we get to a place where it's regulated properly and people are free to do what they want within that regulation, and people are taking their personal responsibility to not affect people around them because of stuff, just like in any other aspect of our own life. If we're not causing other people problems, then it's not going to be a problem that we're going to have to take care of. So if we get to a place where people aren't making problems for other people, then we won't be getting community complaints about it, and we won't have to enforce anything because people are making good decisions. It's just, I guess, adulting.
Adults being adults, right? Okay. Well, how about a round of applause for all three of our speakers? Thank you so much for coming out and doing this. I know I learned a lot today, quite a few tidbits. This is great. Again, I want to thank our sponsors, Riverview Community Bank, Larry and Kathy, thank you very much. And Portland General Electric, John, thank you. Gresham Barlow School District and Metro East Community Media. Don't forget to pick up the flyer on the way out so you can watch this again. Upcoming topics next month, July, we're going to have a legislative wrap-up. We're demanding they get out of town. I want you to stop working in Salem and come to Gresham. We are co-hosting with EME, East Metro Economic Alliance, and West Columbia Gorge Chamber. So the three organizations are combining to have a legislative wrap-up. We have 4 confirmed speakers that day, 3 that aren't sure they want to show up yet. Actually, no, 3 that couldn't make it. So I'm looking forward to that. It should be a very enlightening time. Bring your questions to there. And if you wouldn't mind, if you take a minute or so to fill out the questionnaire, the evaluation sheet, that'd be wonderful. Having said that, put on your sunscreen and go out to this Oregon weather. Thank you for being here.